So we are the scientific Python ecosystem. We're trying to build community, rebuild some communities, and to provide tools to help maintainers in your daily life. So we're going to present this to you. So today it's a few of us. So you have Juanita here, which is a community maintainer, and she's going to have a booth this afternoon. So at 6:30, here, room 106. And we also have 2 talks tomorrow. So one for the community engagement, again from Juanita, and another one for all the tools that we're going to talk about in this session. And we also have Jared here, Milmats and Stefan van der Waal. So he's joining on Zoom. So you want to say a few words, Stefan?
Oh, hi everyone. Unfortunately, I can't see you all, but thanks so much for your interest in the session. This is Hey everyone. I am experiencing severe fear of missing out here, but fortunately we had a new arrival in our family, so I can't be here this year. We started working on the scientific Python ecosystem of libraries in early 2000s. Jared brought me in when I was still a master's student down in South Africa, and it's been a phenomenal journey along the way. And I'm so excited at the prospect of building out the community and involving other people in the same way I got to experience. The ecosystem started out very informally with a few people sitting around the table at this very conference, discussing the roadmaps of Numpy, SciPy, and many of the other core tools. And that worked for a long time while the libraries were so small, while there were few people involved. But we have experienced great success and great adoption, which is wonderful. But at the same time, it became much harder to coordinate these efforts. And so it's really exciting for me that we are now in a position to again to make a more formal effort to coordinate this work. And thank you all for your involvement in the ecosystem, for everything you do, for all the volunteer time, and for helping us better coordinate the work and making the ecosystem a better place for developers and users.
I'll add to that. I think so a few of you were here for the early days of SciPy when it was back in Caltech, and I'm pretty sure this is about the number of people we would get at the early conferences, and there's just this little walk. So it's really amazing how the community's grown.
So yeah, what are we doing at Scientific Python? So we are doing a few things. So we are doing what we call specs, which are a bit like PEP or NEP and things like that. So there are documents which are guidelines to help maintainers of project to align on things. So it can be having a common infrastructure for CI, or having a way to lazy load imports, things like that. We are also having some Hugo team for the website of the main page. For instance, SciPy and Numpy, they are using the same theme. So if you go to scipy.org or numpy.org, you should see that it's similar. That's because it's the same web theme.
Oh, we should also say it complements the Sphinx data, our PyData Sphinx theme, which many of our projects are using for the core documentation. So the Hugo thing has been more for the front pages, not the documentation part. So we're working closely with the PyData Sphinx team, and hopefully aligning our look much closer over time.
And they might join the project at some point.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we're helping out with them too, so it's a friendly community.
And so yeah, we're doing this. We're also trying to have a central place for all the calendars, for all the community talks. So if you go to our page right now, you have all the calendars for Numpy, for SciPy, for Matplotlib, you have NetworkX, so a few projects. And if you have a project here and you want to add your community course to this calendar, we're happy to help you set it up. It's very easy, and that's the goal of this booth, is to present you these tools, and so that you're actually taking ownership of these tools and using them, and want to help any maintainers, any projects.
it's a very simple YAML configuration file with a PR, and we're happy to help any problems that arise.
Of course, it's PR based because maintainers we are living in GitHub now. So. We also have analytics. So we've seen that there is a big pushback now in Europe, for instance, about Google Analytics and things like that. And it's very important to have analytics for websites because not to track users and have what browser you're using to have targeted ads or something like that. That's not what we are looking at. What we want is to get analytics so that we know which page are used, which page are not in our documentations, and this might help you to know, okay, this feature it's supposedly important, or on this page people are spending like 10 minutes, although it's a small page and there is not so many information. So maybe there is something to rewrite in the documentation, it's not clear or something like that. So that's what we want. And so we have analytics in the sense that we are providing a server, self-hosted, and the analytics, they are based on plausible AI, so it's tracking very little things. It's a very light overhead for your website.
And so good thing if you're using Google Analytics, this might be a thing to think about replacing.
Exactly. So if you're in Europe, you cannot use Google Analytics anymore if you're following the rules. So that might be a solution for you. We also recently launched a blog, and so here we are looking for writers mainly because we have people that can review what could be included in the blog, but we need writers now. So people with technical backgrounds, yes or no, design, or anything which is related to scientific projects, really. So if you're if you want to write a tutorial, you have some specific use case which you think might be interesting to the general community, you want to write some outtakes, some things like that, go for it. Yes.
Yeah, oh, just to add on, we've been hosting the outtakes workshops with the specs, and there's a lot of good stuff out there that's become more accessible.
Yes.
Yeah. So there is
also, if you've got, so NetworkX, we're having our Google Summer Code students put their blog posts there. So it's a nice thing where you can see all of the Google Summer of Code things. If other projects want to do that, we'd highly encourage you. Hopefully lots of you have Google Summer of Code programs running this summer.
And you may have seen it, Matplotlib, they had a blog, and they decided to support us in this journey, and they moved all their content into this blog. And so hopefully at some point, a large portion of the blog posts coming from the community could be gathered and centralized into this place. So we want to make it like something very a low barrier of entry. So we don't want to have people reviewing the blog post as they review a PR, of course. So nobody should be afraid to post something on these blogs. It's never like a statement saying if a blog is coming for explaining something on Numpy, it's not necessarily the view and position of the Numpy team, and it does not need to be reviewed as you would put something into Numpy's documentation. So it's something which is easier to contribute to for newcomers and not newcomers. You want it to be like an open place for everybody to come and share ideas, but fast. And so something else we've been working on is Discus and Discord. So I wrote it like that as a lot of communities started with mailing lists to present things. And we think now that there are better tools than just having a mailing list. And these tools, they can be divided into two categories. So you have the live interactions, and so that's where Discord is entering the space. And you have Discus, which is more replacing the mailing list. It's like a forum-like. And so we open two different spaces for that. And here again, you're free to come and join us. We want both spaces to be attractive for you, to help you. The Discord, for instance, it really helped us on SciPy, for instance, as I could talk with Matt in real life, or to maintain some things, to review some pull requests and things like that. So we really think that this can bring some value to the project. I know a lot of people, especially early adopters and early maintainers of libraries, are a bit afraid or against this kind of new ways of communication, but we do think that it has a space. It's, as always, optional, and we don't say that everything should happen there, but some people really like to interact with these tools. It's also more inclusive because on a mailing list, when you post something, It's on the open, everybody sees it, and some people might not feel comfortable to ask questions or interact with you. And so having a direct channel to, or something less formal to talk might help people. So moving on to the dev stats. So on GitHub, you have your project and you can see some statistics. But we had the feeling some things were missing about community engagement, or how long does the PR stays open before it's closed? What's the emergency first response? What's the time it takes to somebody to reply to an issue when it's first open, things like that. So we are trying to add new metrics, and so we are already have built some dashboards for a few of the projects in their ecosystem to help them understand a bit better how they interact on GitHub with their community.
We also have sort of a lot of use cases you can imagine for this. So I mean, obviously just keeping track of community health, maybe comparing different projects, but as we're starting to get more funding, we're hoping some of these graphics and analytics would be useful for presenting your grant proposal, but also maybe you're doing a maintainers grant and you've been funded. Ideally, like that work would show up in some of these statistics, and you could use that as your progress report. So we're hoping these would be sort of things you could use. And for the dev stats, the idea would be, all the data would be posted in a repository, all the scripts would be hosted in a repository. We're putting the displays online, but you can just grab the scripts and data and do whatever you want with them.
So yeah, I would say that's it for what we currently do. We have a lot of ideas, but what we're trying to do, what we want to do right now is to hear from you, from maintainers, and what we want us to help you with. If you have some questions on these initiatives, and yeah, let's open the discussion.
So the dev stats, are you grabbing that straight from GitHub?
Yeah. Do you want to say more?
Are there any holdouts of people that haven't switched over to Git, or I know other projects might not be hosted on GitHub? Like in our community, are we pretty much centralized around GitHub?
I think we are. That said, I mean, what we did first was just. I'm sorry.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Yes. The question was: is everyone in our community on Git and maybe even GitHub? And I probably would say that's more or less getting to be true. I don't know if it's entirely true. We just chose a handful of projects to begin with that are, the ones we've been interacting with, and so it's like Numpy, SciPy, Matplotlib, IPython, NetworkX, scikit-learn, scikit-image, maybe pandas, I can't remember what else. But we're happy to add extra ones to that. And if there's not GitHub stuff, maybe we can figure out how to get from GitLab or SourceForge. I don't know if they have an API or wherever else. But yes, yeah. I mean, we happen to just use GitHub because that's what we're using. We're not.
Yeah, I guess now that I think about it, I think like maybe I think GLPK is hosted on SourceForge over there. There's some layer programming stuff that's on that are mirrored sometimes on GitHub, but not officially there.
Yeah, and then I guess if they're mirrored, it probably would be a little difficult to run some of the same statistics, because I don't know how the PRs would show up, or I mean, they might get all the commits, but they may not get all of the interactions and stuff.
Let's not create a problem for the
problem. Yeah. But yeah, so all this stuff is prototypey. So DevStats was just like a weekend project right now, more or less, maybe a week project. So in all this stuff, we're also looking for more people to come contribute. So if you're very interested in this kind of thing, there's all kinds of work you can imagine doing on this web analytics. And if we grow this to a large number of projects, there'll probably be issues in terms of thinking about data and all kinds of more complicated issues that we've just not had to deal with, because we're looking at like a year of like data for a couple of projects. But yeah, there's lots of places to help. And any place you help, we're looking to make new teams and get people in new leadership roles. So I think there's a lot of, if you're interested in any of these spaces, there's places to grow and get more visibility in the community.
It's hard to be a maintainer now if you start and you want to contribute. Being a maintainer of SciPy, Numpy, or Matplotlib, if you start now, it's a bit difficult. There are large projects and there are still roles to take. But in this space, for instance, it's very early stage, and there are a lot of roles to take if you're interested in having really something to influence and to say. And I just want to preface, there is a HackMD here, so if you want to live ask questions or things like that you want to ask us, we can ring them and stuff like that.
There's also a handful of people that might be wearing shirts with signs of Python. So those people are mostly people that know more about the project, so feel free to talk to them. But when we started, we talked about we're Scientific Python. There is this group of us that are in front of you talking about it, but we are Scientific Python. So, whatever we're doing is just trying to support things, and wherever we go is what the community is going to want. So, we're hoping to get more drivers and more people steering and contributing. And then the goal would be that this would be something that would reduce burdens across projects, not add a new layer of burden.
Please.
Could you share an example of a spec, just like something that you would want to include in a spec?
Can I expand this question and ask, like, how is the spec process going?
Well, so it's very early on. So last year we sort of set up the infrastructure and the sort of committees and everything. Sort of had a tentative announcement last year at the SciPy conference, and then we got a few specs going, but largely, we're a small group of people, and we ended up getting so last year DevStats didn't exist, the blog didn't exist, the Hugo thing didn't exist, almost everything else didn't exist. So we've fleshed out some of those other pieces now, and our goal is to go back with the specs. That said, there's spec 1, which is the lazy importing. That one is essentially more or less done. We haven't changed it from draft status, but that has been implemented by NetworkX, adopted and implemented by NetworkX, adopted and implemented by SciPy, Napari, scikit image, and so we need to go through and do some stuff. It also is now, there's a PEP 690, I believe that's the number,
yes.
Is that right?
Yes,
yeah. And if you look at that, you'll see that in the motivation they mentioned the spec 1. So when originally I think and also this is maybe even thinking about how important specs could be. So NEP 29 is a Numpy enhancement proposal that really should be a spec in the sense that it's not a Numpy thing, but specs didn't exist, so that was the most reasonable place for it to go. But it has when you have to support or drop support for all versions, and recently we dropped support for Python 3.7, and Stefan and I were looking through release notes for 3.8, because now we dropped it, is there anything we can do? And after a bit, we noticed that this lazy import was possible now, which was, in some sense, the original hope of SciPy back in the day. The fact that you have to do all the from SciPy import was not the original goal. That was just that everything got too heavy to load in all at once. And so then I think, I don't know who we contacted. We contacted one of the authors and said, is this going to get into C Python? They said, no way, never. And so then we made spec 1, and within a year, now there's a PEP 690. So I don't know how much we influenced that. I think that wasn't really us, but it's certainly, we were, I think, helping the case. If that PEP is accepted, I think the fact that we've already been doing it is going to be helpful.
If you go read the PEP, they are listing the work that the spec did. So yep. It definitely had some influence in some ways.
I would be interested, like the other slide you had with a big list of things. Maybe not a DevStats thing, but maybe like an ecosystem thing to see where, when do you declare, victory over a spec? I guess when you see enough projects adopt it.
Yep.
So just doing having an audit going, saying who has adopted and is it.
Yeah. So we have right now this sort of special set of projects called our core projects that do something called endorsing. And so that idea would be figuring out when it gets out of draft, and then we have this adoption phase, which would be all the rest of the ecosystem, and we haven't really figured out what to do with that. So that'd be the exact kind of thing we want, and we also could, that'd be something if people want to come in and help figure out how to make that happen. It could be that we have something with GitHub Action, where you check something, or I don't know. Different projects might have different ways of figuring out adoption, but I think one thing we have now, if you go to the spec page, is that once the core projects adopt, we're going to have the actual logos for them, and that idea would be that maybe if I see 1,000 projects adopt something, it may not be as informative to me as if I know all the projects I depend on. So those will get icons. Then I think maybe it would be useful also to have a counter for just pure projects. So I think there's a lot of space to improve that idea, and we do have a spec steering committee. And we are happy to get new members. We're also happy to get new core projects. For the core projects, what we want is projects that are essentially imported by a lot of the ecosystem. So in practice, I think that will look like. And also, this is all subject to the steering committee's future decision making. So we wrote some stuff, but that is all now the steering committee's property.
So we have 8 projects in the steering committee, right?
Yeah, maybe 9. And there's some missing ones that I want to, X-Ray is one that I would like to talk to, so X-Ray developers, we should talk Yes. And then, what did I say about that? Yeah, so the steering committee, essentially is going to be able to expand its membership. So if people want to come in and help work on this, then the spec steering committee's job is really to help shepherd this community process. They don't have any. There's no imposition. There's no way to enforce any of this right now. It's just we're going to make some suggestions and hope that the community likes them and adopts them. But for that really to be the case, we'll need to have a lot of engagement with the community, and the community will need to drive a lot of the decision making. But yeah, we're looking for more core projects over time. We're looking for more spec steering people. Also, a lot of the discussion takes place on our discussion forum, discuss.scientificpython.org. So I encourage everyone to sign up there, and you can basically silence all those notifications or you can turn them on. The other thing we want, I can't remember, we mentioned this already, but with those mailing lists in discussion forum or the discourse forum, the idea would be you could now tag it like a Numpy, CI, or whatever, and then some people might just be interested in Numpy questions. Some people might be interested in CI questions, but then CI stuff might be across projects. So I think there's lots of ways that this could improve things. At the very least, right now I've got a Numpy, SciPy. I mean, I've got a ton of mailing lists I belong to. This would be one thing, and then I can just register some tags, which would be much nicer for my inbox, I think.
I mean, on the technical side.
Yes.
Can I add something on the specs?
Yes, Stefan, I was like, that seems like a disembodied voice.
Yeah, just want to mention on the specs that, of course, there's no enforceability. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're going to try to get your face up on the screen, but
I'm looking.
No, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
No need to see my face.
There we go.
Just want to mention about the specs that, of course, there's no notion of enforceability. This is a signal to the community of ideas that have been discussed and accepted amongst various projects. And selecting the core projects is just a mechanism of showing that these bigger, well-used projects support certain ideas. But one of the other ideas behind the specs is also that it's easy for big projects to establish practices and spread those practices across the community. The big project or the core projects already look at one another to establish practices. But it's harder for small projects to come up with good ideas and have the bigger projects adopt them. So the specs also provide a mechanism for that to happen. A small project can come with a good idea, write it up as a spec, and the big projects or the core, the more used projects will take it to potentially adopt those ideas. So it goes both ways around.
yes. Yep.
Just from the PEP editor perspective, I think this actually is quite similar to the situation with packaging PEPs, because unlike with the core PEPs, there isn't one core team that decides, okay, we're going to implement this PEP. There's a lot of packaging projects, and there's a lot of coordination among them, and there's the PyPA, which may be sort of the equivalent to the Scientific Python organization that you're trying to build. And the real challenge, of course, is getting, like you said, is getting adoption and helping projects implement. I think one challenge is getting buy-in to the specs, and I think the other challenge is just projects having the bandwidth to actually implement the spec. And I think maybe something to think about is, which seems like you guys have a lot of talent for reaching out and organizing projects and finding funding, is maybe having some sort of trying to make the specs, when possible, for not all specs as possible, have some sort of reference to implementation projects can either look at and either adopt as a module, like some of the modules in the packaging ecosystem, or at least can use as a basis for their work. And maybe if you guys have or are able to get funding, potentially having at least a limited amount of funding to have people, basically people, spec implementers at large who help go around and help implement the specs on different projects. I think that would, and then in return, projects can contribute that back to the specs and to other projects. So I think that obviously not sure how feasible any or all those ideas are, but I think, like you said, the implementation and the buy-in and the adoption is going to be the big challenge, and it's like herding cats, just like with packaging in Python, as everyone knows. But I really think this offers a lot of great potential for that. So I'm looking forward to talking further at the maintainers some of that.
Yes, I think there's a bunch of little ways of that resonates completely with my thinking too, and I think that's probably a lot of the specs will be like that. So certain specs will be more like not technical, so those maybe wouldn't have something, but like for the lazy loading one, do you guys want to say a little bit about the lazy loader? Stefan?
Sorry, I missed a bit the context of what we're discussing right now.
So there's a couple of issues. So one was the funding issue, but I was thinking more particular, he was saying that sometimes it's nice to have a reference implementation. And I was thinking for the lazy loader, that is a good example, I think, where we do. And you could also maybe say some limitations in terms of SciPy applying it.
Right, yeah, so with the lazy loader, we took scikit image as an example and made a first trial implementation of what a lazy loader would look like. But of course you only run into the issues then that scikit image is presented with. The moment we made that into a package and made it more widely available, it got adopted in various places. Before we even did that, the Pari tried it out. We tried to put that into SciPy, but SciPy, because of its complexities, we had to do a much lighter version of it. So we had all these different versions floating around, and then we centralized them into a package that we released. But even then, once we put it out there, the Pari reported that they can no longer, in editors that support types, for example, the lazy loader prevents the type inference from happening. So even this week there was another addition to the package to make that possible. So yeah, I think that the generality of these implementations will evolve as more and more projects adopt the ideas.
Yeah, and also we're really thinking of the specs as almost a registry, right? So they may not flesh out everything, but in this case they give you the motivation, and we're really trying to make the specs short, crisp, and like really to the point, so that when you read them, like everyone's like, oh, I get it. But then they might actually point somewhere else. So in this case, it points to the lazy loader, and then lazy loader is getting its own updates like the normal projects would. So yeah, we also haven't really thought about how versioning would work for these things, just because like some things you'll have like packages with releases, some things you'll have practices that evolve over time. So a lot of this stuff we're trying to do a very lightweight, minimal sort of idea first, and we're hoping as we get more experience and more steering committee members and more energetic new ideas coming in, will evolve into something much more interesting and useful over time.
Well, and the versioning issues, just briefly, that's something that we struggle with patch 2, and we're packaging, we're basically moving all the canonical specs over to the packaging.python.org. And I'm actually moving over 517, 518 to 660 right now. Yep. And having that as be the canonical source, and then TEPs are basically the change proposals, the updates to that. I'm not sure how that would work with the scientific Python ecosystem, but that's at least that one model is something you might want to think about for the future.
Absolutely.
But keeping things lightweight seems like a good idea at first.
Yep. Especially until we see that this is going to be successful. Yes. Sorry.
Just wanted to mention, because I think this seems to be the appropriate time to mention, because packaging come up. Jan is one of the Conda maintainers, and one of the things that we've done in the past year, trying to kind of organize the evolution of Conda and make it a little more appropriate, also coordinate data kind of with the PyTA. But in particular, I want to mention, because that came up, we have now Conda enhancement proposals as well. So in case we basically need to coordinate cross-organizational, across the ecosystem to make things easier. Conda is, I don't know, a little bit orthogonal to Python packaging, I know. But it's, just want to mention it, that it's, especially regarding Python support and all that kind of stuff, it's really actually quite amazing that we're doing this. And in case you have something to say about Conda, let us know.
Yes, that'd be great.
It would be definitely great to have all these steering committees talking to each other from time to time, either to align on things or.
I guess I have a question related to this. I feel like it would be nice if core Python had input from the scientific Python community. Is there any plans for trying to have scientific Python have a formal role within the broader Python core team?
So there is some connections. Stefan, I think you have some PSF connections. Do you want to say more about that? Or I guess update a current status at least.
Can you repeat the question to me?
He was asking about our input and feedback to, I don't know, I'm facing you like, I don't even know where the Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. He was asking the question about the need and what the mechanisms are right now for our community to feed back to the core Python community. And I think we probably need to think about that more formally, but I was thinking maybe you could say a little bit about the history and what your current status is. So, I mean, we have gotten a lot of support from the community, but I do think we could do better. But yeah, I think you have some role in PSF. Stefan, do you want to?
Yeah, I think we used to have better overlap actually than we do now. And in the early days of Numpy, especially, there used to be a lot of conversations between Guido and the Python core developer team on, for example, whether Numpy would be integrated into the core or how they could support the array buffer protocol, etc. But yeah, I think we were encouraged as a scientific community to implement our own solutions for the problems we faced because they were fairly unique. But that means indeed that I don't think we've been paying enough attention to places of potential overlap. Definitely something we should grow. Yeah, we do have a scientific Python working group as part of the PSF. It's mainly a funding body right now, so it doesn't really deal with, it gives out small grants and supports people attending conference tutorials, etc. But yeah, there's not a lot of technical interaction there.
Yeah, I'm just curious, raising hands, how many people are aware of the PSF funding working group stuff? Not many, okay. Yeah, so I think that's one of the things that I think we also need to do a better job of, and we've thought about with the Scientific Python, is just having a list of all the types of funding to make sure that people know it's available. Another thing we would want to do is start keeping track of grants and progress reports. Because when I first at least started working on grants, the very first thing I did was went to a bunch of colleagues that had successful grants and asked them to give me copies of what they had so I could see what a good grant proposal looked like. Because there is a bit of a just art to figuring out what a proposal looks like. And then also just getting a sense of where the money is going in our community might be helpful for us as well. Yes, Dario?
Yeah, Dario from CCI. So we've had some of these conversations in the past couple of weeks, but I think it would be useful if you could clarify more the intended scope of these initiatives and what counts as a part of this scientific Python. And you said there's like a user registry of specs. There's no formal mechanism to say, oh, you're doing these specs. But I'm thinking about the extreme use case. I developed in my spare time a library that I'm the only user for. Okay, would you be interested in including the long tail of small projects endorsing the specs? Or is there some criteria that you're defining to define what counts as a core scientific projects that you see as part of this?
Yes, yeah, so for the quote-unquote core projects, I mean, it's part because we just had used that phrase before a lot for these projects. But really the idea is that these are just the core projects from the Scientific Python Ecosystem Coordination Document perspective. And so for those, what we want, and they're the ones that can endorse, but we want input and adoption from lots of projects. But the initial idea there, which might evolve, is that the core projects should be ones that lots of people are watching and paying attention to. So they should have a big user base and things like that. Just because the endorsement idea is supposed to be a signal that big influential projects with lots of developers and really good governance structures and review process have reviewed these things. But then there's also just some discussions about what is a scientific Python project in general. And that's something that I think we can't just impose, but that's something I would be interested in doing eventually over time. I think I was talking to some of the scikit HEP developers, and they have sort of they might be here somewhere and they can speak about this. Oh yes, but yeah, do you want to say something about, you guys have sort of a sense of what makes a HEP project, right? In terms of at least what your best practices are with CI and things like recommendations like that. Is that correct, or?
Yeah, well, we developed the scikit HEP developer pages, which was spearheaded mostly by me, but has the other, goes through the pull request process with the other developers, and they've added things as well. And we've sort of come up with certain things that we think are useful, usually because it starts on one package, goes to a couple other packages, and then it gets added to the scikit HEP developer pages. In fact, there's been some examples recently, I think. Matthew added a citation. Which one did you do? Citation?
Yeah, so we're starting to have citation.cff files be added to all of the scikit-hep packages, so that you, in addition to having a common format that's exportable into multiple citation formats, it also on the GitHub repository page will also populate with a kind of Cite Me button on the right-hand side that just allows you to click and export into multiple different citation formats.
Yeah, so that process was basically, it was implemented in 1 or 2 repositories. We sort of thought a little bit about what a best practice would look like. And then it basically became a PR into the scikit-hep pages. That's open for discussion for a while. And then it gets merged in.
Yep.
And so we've now ended up with this long list of things that we recommend. And then the project authors can start implementing that. It also helps that we have some CI help for that. So we have a cookie cutter, which will then include a template file for that, and then we have a repo review guideline, which is there built into the pages in WebAssembly, and you can just enter in your repository. It'll tell you if you're passing this thing or not.
And then one of the things we also want to do is there's already a lot of work like this that, you know, the scikit-hep thing really is like a community-wide resource, except it's in a brand that's like not so clear to everyone that, you know, you might think, oh, that's high energy particle physics or something. So this also is a branding opportunity where if you've got some project that really would make more sense at a much more visible layer, talk to us and we can sort of give you that, you know, space on our org or our website or whatever. And we're not, you know, looking to take over projects that we have very little help, or, you know, very little time. So if you already have a working project and a governance structure, you know, you can just rebrand and keep everything like the same. We're not trying to take things over. Yep.
Chad?
Yeah. Yes. Stefan.
I just want to make a comment about the long tail, the small projects. I think the you know, the core project idea is it's a mechanism for sifting out good ideas out of the community. But ultimately, I think it's the smallest projects that benefit the most from the centralized work that we're doing. The biggest challenge of a small project is getting off the ground, getting new users, and there's just an overwhelming amount of things to do when you launch a new project, because you have to sort out your web pages, you have to sort out how to structure your code base, you have to implement features, you have to get new users, you have to advertise and so on. And so what we're trying to do here is implement the mechanisms and the infrastructure that will help projects to get started quickly. Now, of course, this is also aimed to support existing projects. That's a big part of it. But I think there's a big benefit to, especially the small projects, in having all of that ready-made.
Yeah. So like the scikit-hep, and there's also a Brookhaven effort, maybe Dan or maybe they were in the visualization one. But you know, taking some of those things where you know, like I have had this happen. I'm sure all of us have had it, where you know, someone reaches out and, you know, for Network X, they're like, hey, I'm thinking about doing something that's, you know, maybe a hypergraph library or something, and we're not supporting that, but we're interested in that happening, and they're like, well, we'll make our own project. We're like, you know, that sounds great, you know, we're going to help out, and they're like, so what do we do? And so it'd be nice for that kind of situation to be like, oh, just run this cookie cutter script, and it'll set up a repository for you, you know, all kinds of things like CI, maybe other things. So I mean, some of these efforts that have already started, I think, you know, just giving more visibility would be great. Yeah, so there's someone in the back.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask the question, at the last in-person SciPy, there's a BOF on PyOpenSci, right? This effort to have a sort of reviewing framework to stamp packages with approval. And I'm wondering, like, A, if anyone knows what happened to that, because it seems pretty adjacent to what you're talking about, and if there's any sort of coordination between the PyOpenSci effort and what you're talking about here.
I mean, I'm aware of our OpenSci, and I think that PyOpenSci is similar, but I haven't followed either of them very carefully. Are you?
We have some in him. Yeah, can I jump in?
Oh yes, yeah, perfect. I saw behind. I was hoping that was one. Yes, please.
Hey, I'm David Nicholson. I help Aaliyah Wasser, is the person who runs PyOpenSci. She's just gotten funding from, is it Sloan or more? I should know. And now that is like that. She was in Colorado, but now she's basically, that's her full-time job, and she'll basically start it up again in September. And yeah, we definitely want to, you know, we're very aware of what y'all are doing. We want to interact. So
yeah, and like I said, we're happy to, we don't want to take over things, we don't want to step on things, we don't want to stop things that are going well. But we're happy to help with branding, which could be moving things over, or just cross-linking, or promoting each other. Yeah, so we should,
Yeah, we'll definitely talk more. And you know, for people that don't know, our OpenSci, and we sort of like follow that model, and I don't want to speak for Leah, who definitely, you know, this is her brainchild, her baby, but you know, we're following our OpenSci model of like being focused on tools for data, right? So like, I'll write a wrapper for an API, and that wouldn't necessarily get like reviewed by JOS first thing, right? It's more of a tool for working with the data. So that's not quite the same as like, you know, providing a cookie cutter for a actual domain specific tool. So definitely can interact in that way.
Yeah, and I think, you know, over time with the coordination, hopefully more coordination, more of these meetings, and informing each other will help round out some of these edges and make things much more seamless and more transparent to people. But yeah, everything I think is still early days, so there's lots of input and energy we need.
Yeah, to jump on it, it's really a coordination effort. We had some ideas, for instance, to say, okay, let's use black now in all projects, and a lot of scientific projects were like, yeah, but black is not formatting math in the right way. So we had some discussion with Lucas, the owner of Black, and he was like, I'm happy to integrate anything you want, but first, the scientific Python community, you have to agree on something. And that's the problem. And so we opened some discussions on our forum, and please join so that we can finally say how math should look like. And if we manage to find something, they will be happy to integrate it, and so that we can finally have math properly formatted in Black. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do here. It's just getting people together to talk to each other, and we all have solutions for some problems, and we all have the same problems. So let's just share the solutions together.
Yeah, so if you go to this URL and sign up, you will be in the discourse discussion forum of ours. So it'd be great to have everyone come.
I pasted the link to the HackMD.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, please.
I have a question about the scope for the discourse. Who gets to have a topic? Is it core packages? Is it ecosystem packages?
I mean, I don't think we've got a specific policy in place now. My initial feeling was that we will be pretty liberal with what we do, and as long as you're respectful and nice and kind. That's the only kind of thing we would really restrict. And I guess we also don't want some spammy kind of thing. But if you're actually developing a scientific Python package of some sort or flavor with some developer at least, then I think we could get something on. The only thing is that as we grow, we'll probably, so I think Discourse has all kinds of moderator roles, and I think we'll probably put structure in place over time as we grow. Because I don't know what will happen if we get 1 billion people on it. We might have to rethink things, but right now I think we don't have any limitations that we're worried about.
Like Discord at the moment, so we're just opening it to everybody now, but it's already being used by a few maintainers who are there. And so
Stefan's on it right now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how you see it.
And so thank you for the QR code. And so feel free to join. We created a few roles already, not for everybody, but now we have like maintainers role and things like that. So that we're trying to just think about how we organize each other. And so right now there are not so many channels, but we're just going to build as we go, as the community needs them to be. We don't want to introduce too much bias here, and it's the same for the whole project. We don't want to dictate things. We'd like to have first a discussion, and because we have ideas, personally I have a lot of ideas, but I don't want my ideas to be your ideas. I want to talk.
Yeah, this is not the Jared Moment Humphrey
Exactly.
the Stefan project. This is the Scientific Python, and that's us. You, and we're trying to do some stuff, but we really want the long-term vision to be what the community wants and needs. So, like, we'll start out, but eventually as things get bigger, we'll probably have to form a discussion forum, governing body or something.
I was wondering, how does code of conduct work if it's open to anyone?
So what?
How does code of conduct work if it's open to external packages?
Well, if you're in our space, you use our code of conduct. And right now, that is essentially verbatim with like some words like SciPy changed to scientific Python from the SciPy code of conduct. I also think there's probably, I have some interest in like consolidating the code of conduct groups. I feel like if we had really good code of conduct committees that really knew what they were doing, it would be better in standard practice across packages. I've heard some people suggest that that should take place on the PSF, maybe non-focus, maybe our group, but you know, essentially I think right now we have our own, but I'm happy to steer that in whatever direction, or I'm happy for the community to steer that in whatever direction they deem necessary or interested. But I do think consolidating some of that stuff, I mean, I think it would be better if more of our packages had just adopted the same one so you don't get confused when you switch.
For our community, I feel like it would be quite useful to have some sort of external reviewer for code of conduct.
Absolutely.
Right now, but I feel like maybe there could be something here.
Yep. And that's the other thing is like I'm on more code of conduct review committees than I probably should be.
And one of the goals could be to have just one code of conduct with one entity which is responsible of enforcing those. So when you have a problem, you don't go to the committee of scikit-learn or the committee of SciPy, you go to the committee of the scientific Python ecosystem, because the truth is you don't have violation of code of conduct like every day. So you could have real experts in this topic to help the whole community.
Yeah. So yes, back.
Just throwing another idea into the mix.
Yep.
Like, so I help lead the Pangeo project, right? And people are often very confused about what Pangeo is. Like, 'cause it's not a package, right? Like, it's more like a stack of packages, some of which are on these lists, that are oriented towards a specific sort of scientific domain and set of workflows. And I think that's kind of a bit generalizable. I think a lot of people who are new to Python, like they just see this bucket of packages and they're like, what do I do? What do I do? So complementary to the actual packages, it might be useful to like have a part of this that's like, okay, what's my stack for doing like genomics? And like, you know, you mix and match, and it's kind of like a Venn diagram of packages. Or what's my stack for doing, you know, climate science? What's my stack for Astro? You know, and some of these communities are more organized than others. Like Astro, I mean, it's very organized. High energy physics is very organized. But with others, you can maybe help catalyze this, and that way people who are new and they like identify, okay, like I'm a biostatistician. Like they just can see where to go, but they also see it's part of a broader thing. And if that existed, we as Pangeo would really like just kind of deprecate a lot of our existing sort of documentation and like community stuff and just move it over to this.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, in some of my sense, I've got Pangeo, scikit-learn, AstroPy, and I'm sure there's a couple other ones where if we could really engage with you, because I mean, I had the exact sort of thing. Well, first we had thought about having a user guide, because you know right now like Numpy has a user guide, SciPy, but when you go to do work, you're not looking at Numpy, SciPy, you're looking at all. But then as we started thinking about it, you really don't even have a scientific Python one. What you have is exactly what you said. I'm a geneticist. What's my way of using scientific Python? So, and that, of course, we're going to need to have expertise in all those areas to keep track of what's going on. Because, and I could maybe do some network graph theory page, but I wouldn't even know how that would look differently for a social scientist versus an ecologist versus some other domain expert. Yeah, so that's all the sort of centralized efforts like that are domains. We'd love to talk to you more and figure out how to essentially like lift what you're doing up to some higher visibility place, but not take over ownership. Or because I mean, obviously, I don't know the geosciences as much as the Pangeo folks.
It can be hard to maintain.
Yeah,
like we would like to be part of something larger.
Yeah, yeah. And then one of the things we can help with is infrastructure and stuff. And then making sure that it's like really clearly visible to people. Yeah. Yes.
I don't think you necessarily need to replicate a lot of what we're doing, but say if you had, if you had a collection of disciplines, and you had high energy physics, and that had a link to the scikit-learn page, that had a link to the awesome list for high energy physics, and various existing resources.
Absolutely.
Just having that. And there, you wouldn't necessarily need to replicate Pangeo, you just need to say, here's the link to that.
I mean,
just that.
The only thing we need to make sure is that these pages, they have some clear owners so that people maintain these things. Because we used to have, even on SciPy or website, we had like some list, if you want to do this, you do that. We still have this page somewhere, I think.
I might have deleted that.
You deleted it? I don't remember.
I know where it is, but
Yeah.
I think I took it off the internet.
But
that said, though, I think there's some old, like I think new.scipy.org might still be up, and we need to get rid of that.
So nobody really maintained these things, so we are really happy to have these kind of pages. We just need to be clear, if you want this in, you find somebody who would like to be owner of this page, and when this person does not want anymore to be owner, this person has to find somebody else, or we retire the pages. Because otherwise, we end up in this situation with things with dead link, and which is not relevant anymore. The community is not even using this, and we're actually advertising for something which we should not, or I don't know. But very happy to do that. Yeah.
And just to reiterate, I mean, again, we're happy to host stuff on our resources, but there's no need for that. What we really want is the visibility and like a central place where you can go. So if it turns out to just be a page of links, that would be perfect. If it turns out people would like to put more resources on our site, we can help support that as well. What time are we at? Are we?
We have a few minutes left. You want to say something about the shirts?
And we also should say we will be or maybe we already are, a fiscally sponsored non-focus organization. There are some signatures out and about in the universe. But once that happens, we will be having a store, and we'll be giving out more shirts in future events.
Because that's what we want to say. We don't have enough shirts
now.
Yeah, so we don't have enough shirts.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try and find a way, figure out how to maybe give them to you, but that's probably gonna happen now because we have 5 minutes left. So if you want to get a shirt, come to the community outreach meeting that we're gonna have today too. And I guess we will figure out the shirt situation because we definitely don't have enough. But there's definitely going to be a non-focus store where you can get shirts and probably stickers and sweaters and everything from Scientific Python.
Yeah, and then one other thing, once we do that, we'll probably wanting to be setting up a grant review group. Because our idea is that this Scientific Python's, we don't have a core developer team, right? It's the community. So we're imagining lots of people in the community might want to write grants under the Scientific Python umbrella. And so we'll need some team of people to figure out, okay, you submit something, you're like, I'd like to make a proposal, and then this team can review whether this is an actual Scientific Python proposal, however that looks. But we're imagining things where you're touching several packages, or maybe you're working on a really niche project that is not big enough to have its own fiscal sponsorship, but it's used by everyone. So I think there's places for that, and if you're interested in that kind of review or organization stuff, there's lots of places to help. And again, we're happy to create new leadership roles, new teams, and make people more visible online. Yep.
So I guess we can invite you to continue this discussion in Discord or in Discus. If you have any more questions or ideas or anything, feel free to reach us out. And also, I recorded the whole session, so we have a YouTube channel, so probably the recording will be there very soon if you want to check it out later and see what you missed. And also, the HackMD notes are available for everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, and I hope to see many of you on our project site and in future events, and please come and see and talk to us about ideas, because we're trying to serve the community, and we have ideas, but we really need people and ideas to help direct us. Okay, thanks, everyone.